Hello, I'm Chidem. Welcome to Live Like a Scientist. I believe science isn't just for researchers. It is for anyone trying to understand the world a little bit better. So in this podcast, we will talk about what that looks like in everyday life. Most people think life should be predictable. If I work hard, I should succeed. If I love so much, they should stay. If I make the right choices, things should just work out. And when they don't, we immediately start looking for an explanation. What did I do wrong? What should I have done differently? What did I miss? But scientific thinking teaches us something both uncomfortable and strangely liberating. Even the best models have unexplained variance. In research, we build models to explain outcomes. Like we identify variables, test correlations, and try to understand what is a cause, what is a result. But no matter how good our model is, there is almost always a part we cannot fully explain or predict. That unexplained part is called the error term. And honestly, I think romantic relationships have error terms. Careers have error terms. Training for a marathon has an error term. Parenting has an error term. Life has an error term. One of the hardest things for humans to accept, though, is that not everything can be predicted, controlled, or explained by our actions alone. So today, I want to talk about the most human part of statistics. If I didn't say it enough already yet, the error term. At this point, you might be thinking, if everything has an error term, why try at all? Like, why study for the exam? Why train for a marathon? Why work on relationships struggling? Why make careful decisions? Why at least try to make careful decisions? The answer is simple. Because reducing the error term is worth trying. Scientific thinking is not about eliminating uncertainty. It is about reducing avoidable error while accepting that some uncertainty will always remain. Scientists, throughout their training and career, learn this. It makes them resilient, consistent. The nuance is that the fact that there's always going to be an error term doesn't make our efforts meaningless. I believe applying this logic to everyday life gives us the motivation to keep going when things get unpredictable. A good thinker doesn't abandon a model just because it's imperfect. She refines it. And when you think about it, that's how life forces us to do all the time, like how to behave. We learn from a divorce after marriage. We revise our career decisions. We improve communication styles. We gather more information about ourselves. We update our beliefs. We adjust our expectations. We change the recipe for the soup we make every night. That is literally model improvement in science. And honestly, isn't that a form of emotional maturity? Like not stubborn certainty, not refusing to change our minds, not judging ourselves based on just one outcome, but having the humility to say, I learned something new today. Let me revise my understanding. Because the goal was never to predict the future perfectly. In an ideal world, that would be great. But in especially social sciences, that's hard. The goal is to make better predictions than we could do yesterday. And I think that distinction matters because people often fall into one of the extremes, like when dealing with uncertainty. The first is the illusion of total control. Many of us secretly believe that if we optimize enough, nothing bad will happen. Like optimize sleep, optimize productivity, optimize dating, optimize routines, optimize happiness. But reality is messier, like way messier. You cannot optimize away certainty. And I think a lot of anxiety comes from forgetting the error term. From believing that if we just work a little harder, prepare a little bit more, or make one more perfect decision, we can finally eliminate uncertainty from our lives. But we can't. So on the other hand, there is a second extreme. It's just as dangerous. It is this way of thinking, Everything is random anyway. Nothing matters. Why bother trying? That mindset leads to helplessness and disengagement. The existence of an error term is not evidence that effort is meaningless. It is evidence that control is incomplete. Scientific thinking lives somewhere between those two extremes. That's why it is constant pursuit of knowledge. It tells us that patterns matter, effort matters, evidence matters, models matter. But certainty is not the goal. The goal is to build the best explanation we can with the information we currently have, while remaining humble enough to recognize its limitations. At this point, it's important to say there is another trap researchers over time learn to watch out for when building models. So sometimes a model can look incredibly accurate, like too accurate. So maybe an example here. Imagine someone loses 20 pounds. They look back and notice that during that period they drank green tea every morning. So they conclude, yes, the secret was green tea. And green tea becomes the centerpiece of their explanation. They recommend it to friends, they post about it online, they become convinced that they have discovered the key, the only thing that works. The problem is that many other things changed during that same period, but they are not talking about it, they are not considering it. Maybe they were also exercising more, they were sleeping better, they were tracking calories for the first time. Maybe they had less stress in their lives. Maybe they stopped drinking soda. The green tea happened to be present during the weight loss, but that doesn't mean it was the driving weight loss. It was the driving factor. Doesn't mean that. A model that pays attention to the wrong patterns can look brilliant when explaining the past, like zero error term at all. But they still fail when predicting the future. And I think humans do this all the time too. Like people share the secret of success. Like they say the exact book they read, the exact morning habit they follow, the exact productivity system they use, the exact thing they happen to be doing when they became successful. But sometimes we are studying the green tea rather than the weight loss process. We are focusing on the most visible pattern rather than the variables that actually matter. A good model is not the one that explains the past most perfectly. A good model is the one that captures the patterns that are likely to hold up in the future. We call this overfitting. Overfitting happens when you become uncomfortable with that unexplained variation and start chasing it. Instead of accepting that some variation is noise and own it, acknowledge it, and say that you included everything that matters you can think of, you just try to explain everything in the data. So again, going from the weight loss example, imagine the true relationship is weight loss is explained by calories, exercise plus error term. But your data set is so small, so you notice things like people who wore red shirts lost more weight, people who drank green tea lost more weight, people who exercise on Wednesdays lost more weight. So you add all of them to the model, the day of Wednesday, the red t-shirts. Suddenly your model explains 99 of the variation. Amazing. Except the model didn't learn anything real. It just explained the data you provided. But when you apply it to new people, it performs terribly. So a good model says, I can explain 70% of the real world. The remaining 30% is uncertainty. At this point of time, I leave it to error term. And it is up to the future studies to improve the model. An overfit model says, no, let me explain that 30% too. I will add the color of shirt, I will add the green tea, I will add the day of exercise. That's why we stay away from people who say they explain everything. So ironically, the scientist who is most desperate to eliminate the error term often ends up with the worst model. So we learned that Like, that's not the way to go. That's not how we do it. That's not how we do science. That's not how we should live our lives. Let's explore some other examples, like how error term affect our daily lives. Like, one example is a first date, right? Imagine you are meeting someone for coffee for the first time. You take your time getting ready, you choose a nice outfit, you show up on time, you ask thoughtful questions, you listen. Even though my partner says I didn't listen to him at all on our first dates, you don't do that. You listen, you're kind, you are genuinely interested in getting to know the other person. In other words, you are doing all the things that should increase your chances of a good outcome. Like, the science of dating has been tried and tested for centuries. These should work. What is the expected outcome here? It is increasing the chance of meeting with the love of your life. And they do. They actually increase your chance. Even if there is no second date in sight. Even though you don't get the call back. Even though you don't respond to that person's text afterwards. Showing up prepared, respectful, and engaged probably makes a successful date more likely than showing up late, distracted, and staring at your phone the whole time. But none of those things guarantee chemistry. Because there are variables that no amount of preparation can control. Maybe the other person recently got out of a relationship. Maybe they are not emotionally available. Maybe they remind you of someone from your past. Maybe your senses of humor didn't align. Maybe there is just not a spark. And sometimes there is no obvious explanation at all. It is simply evidence that there was an error term that you cannot explain. The existence of an error term is not an argument against putting yourself out there, though. And it is certainly not an argument against making smart decisions and preparation. Well, so in addition to prepare us for better for real life scenarios, what else does knowing about error term do? Knowing about error term makes us a better person. Yes. It prevents us from being too full of ourselves, like someone know it all. Have you ever noticed some of the people who seem the most confident are often the people who know the least? You did, right? And some of the people with the most expertise choose to stay silent or be cautious when answering a question. It is because they know what error term is. Yes. Because when you first learn a topic, it is easy to believe you have found the perfect explanation. The answer, you got it. You have the formula. Your model feels perfect. Like everything appears to fit. The argument just makes perfect sense. But as you learn more, something strange happens. You don't just learn what you know. You start learning what you don't know. You start seeing variables you hadn't considered before. Exceptions, trade-offs, context, boundaries. You become aware of the error margin of your explanation. And once you see it, it is hard to unsee it. I think this is true not only in science, but in real life, like every day. That's why the people I admire most are not the people who always seem certain. The people I admire are the people who are comfortable acting under uncertainty. I think this is also one of the biggest misconceptions about successful people. Successful people are not like the people always so certain. Many of them are willing to make decisions without having perfect information. That's what makes them successful. And maybe that's because they understand something important. A model without an error term is not necessarily a better model. Yeah, let's talk about it a little bit. Like, if error term is the part we can't explain, then a model without an error term should be great, right? Like, that's the goal. Like, that's where we should go. That should be the direction. But not always. That shouldn't be the pure goal. Sometimes an answer without an error term is just a less honest one, not a better one. Humans love explanations that seem to explain everything. Like, that's why we see big headlines everywhere. This is why people are unhappy. This is how to build a successful business. This is how to find the perfect love. This is how to become wealthy. Simple, clean, certain. The problem is that, like as we said earlier, the reality is always messier. That's why, to me, some of the most dangerous ideas come from people who believe their model explains everything. The people who always have an answer. The people who never review their views. Like the people who never say, I might be wrong. And this creates an interesting problem in public life, which I'm not very happy about it. Like the people who understand complexity often sound less certain because they are aware of everything their model doesn't capture. Meanwhile, the people who offer wrong explanations sound confident and easy to follow. But humans love certainty. We like clear answers. We like shortcuts. We like guarantees. So it's not surprising that the loudest voices on social media, television, and sometimes in politics are not always the people with the deepest understanding of a topic. Because expertise often sounds like it depends, like based on the evidence. There are multiple factors at play. While certainty without deep knowledge sounds like this is the answer. And it is usually much easier to sell. Think about social media. The internet rewards certainty. It rewards hacks, formulas, absolute outcomes, 5 steps to success, 3 secrets to happiness, 1 mindset shift that changes everything, 1 food will make you lose 10 pounds before summer. Science rarely sounds like that. And listen, I understand why certainty sells better. Uncertainty can feel uncomfortable. But I would rather live in reality than in a perfectly fitting story that happens to be wrong. That's one of the reasons I started this podcast. Not to give life hacks, not to pretend I have all the answers, but to share some of the statistical tools like mental models for thinking with a structure. And maybe that's the closest thing to a real life hack I have found in my pursuit of knowledge. Not certainty, not having all the answers. Just remembering that there is always an error term. Just like life, right? Maybe maturity is realizing that life was never supposed to behave like a perfect equation. And a good scientist understands that. The goal is not to eliminate uncertainty completely. The goal is to make better decisions despite it. Scientific thinking didn't make me fear uncertainty less because it gave me certainty. It made me fear uncertainty less because it taught me this. Some uncertainty can be reduced. Some uncertainty must be accepted. And knowing the difference matters. Many of the things we call like discipline, wisdom, or preparation are really attempts to reduce error term. When we study, save money, practice, seek advice, or learn from our mistakes, we are not controlling the future. We are improving our model of it. This is exactly how science works. Researchers begin with a hypothesis. They identify the factors most likely to influence an outcome. They gather evidence, test assumptions, compare competing explanations, and revise their thinking when new information becomes available to figure out which variables belong in the model and which don't. And the process never really ends. As models improve, they explain more of a reality. Not all of it, more of it. The error term never disappears completely, but a stronger model leaves less of the outcome unexplained. And I think there's something hopeful about that. Yes, hopeful. Because uncertainty is not simply an obstacle. It is also an opportunity. It is the reason we can do everything right and still experience disappointment. Some plans fail, some relationships end, some opportunities never materialize, and yes, that's bad. But it is also the reason life can surprise us. Unexpected friendships appear. Unexpected opportunities emerge. Unexpected joy finds us. The same uncertainty that always allows failure also makes success possible. If everything were perfectly predictable, that would be then there would be no surprise, no discovery, no wonder, no growth, no becoming. In science, we call it the error term. In life, we call it possibility. It is the space between what we can explain and what we cannot. The space where hope lives. And sometimes, if we are lucky, where miracles happen. If you are facing a terrible situation right now that was totally out of your control, yes, it happens. It happens to all of us. That is because there is that little margin you couldn't account for. And if something feels impossible right now, it is still that margin that can change things. You can't control the error term. In the meantime, spend your energy on building a better model. That's what you can control. Science teaches us this. I'll see you in the next episode. Until then, stay close to science.